Alright, I have decided that I'm going to show you guys a new thing really quick and just set up an entirely different node structure. So I'm going to make two just new standard surfaces. Kind of wish I just used, I'll do red, and actually just make this red, and I will show you basically an alternative node to the AI curvature node. And that is the aiAmbientOcclusion node. So depending on what you're trying to do, a lot of times, honestly, they behave really similarly, but sometimes you'll just want, one over the other. So we have, alright, so we have our blue shader and a red shader, and all I'm going to do is just, I don't know why I keep deciding new materials, it's like a weird way to do things. Like I said, you can grab the AI mix shader through the regular node. Mix red, and I'm just going to, this actually, if you wanted to, you could make new shaders just as you do this, which probably makes more sense. For some reason, I just like hooking things up in the hypershade. I think it's fun, because I have a weird sense of fun. You can see as I made new things, since I have the hypershade just up in the background, it went through and just threw everything on the screen, so I'm just going to clear that, because that's an absolute mess. So I'm going to grab mix red blue, and this is where it becomes important to label things, because like we have 3 mix shaders for the last texture, or the last shader we made, and now we have another one. So naming does become important in this. So I'm just going to grab red and throw in shader 1, and blue and throw in shader 2. And now we have this really, honestly, I kind of like it, which is gross, but take the roughness down because it's awful. We have the red and the blue. So I will throw this down here. And again, I just hit this little button to expand all my options so we can just see what's happening. So we have the red and the blue, and instead of this time using an AI curvature node, what I'm going to do is use an aiAmbientOcclusion node. So Arnold has its own ambient occlusion. I'm actually just going to hide this because I don't really need to look at that. So it has its own ambient occlusion shader. This is a little different. It's basically calculating what will be calculated for the shader. It's just not a shader itself. So what I'm going to do is pipe this in. I'm just going to grab, again, either the R, the G, or the B. It doesn't really matter. It's black and white. They're all the same values. Throw that into my mix. And you can see that now we have this really, really trippy mushroom. Sort of, actually, really, that's pretty sweet looking. So we have this really weird mushroom setup here. And basically what this is doing, you'll notice it's kind of doing the same thing in this case, like in here, as the curvature node. It's just calculating it differently. So instead of being based off the curvature, it's being based on how close geometry is to other geometry. So in this case, something like this is going to pick up all these little dents in the mushroom much, much better than the ambient occlusion node, or I'm sorry, than the AI curvature node, just because of how it calculates stuff. So if you try one and it's not quite doing what you want, maybe try the other one. And again, the same thing with this, like you have, you can adjust the spread of things. So if you want it to just pick up like really, really tiny crevices and stuff, you can turn the spread down a bit. I'm gonna mostly look at the mushroom because I think that's probably the most descriptive thing that I have here. Mess with that. You can mess with the fall off. Honestly, I found that this is like a pretty aggressive setting. It tends to like really strip down a lot of color really, really fast. But you can mess with the different ways that this sort of, behaves. Honestly, I just kind of go through a lot of times and like play with settings and I'm like, ooh, that didn't do what I wanted, like let me undo that. Self only is not going to be, I guess it actually is, it is a little bit obvious. Well, not obvious, but, so you're going to want to look at this area right down here. Ambient occlusion calculates the distance from other geometry, and that includes geometry other than the object itself. So curvature node only works on a specific object. This works based off of proximity to anything else. So if I check on self only, this little corner is going to get a little bit less red. What this is doing is basically saying only calculate this per object. If this object is close to it, I don't care. I only want this to register geometry on the same object. So to make that actually also a little bit more clear, a lot of times like ambient occlusion is really nice to just sort of throw into Lambert plane. It's pretty nice to just sort of like throw in as a render pass on your final render. So we throw this in there. Alright, so shoot. Alt-Z is a nice hotkey to get back to the same, I don't know where it was. Same view you were looking at before. It's basically undo for camera moves, which I was hoping to, yeah, it's kind of cool. Alright, so here is Ambient Occlusion. Oh goodness, okay. Ambient Occlusion node. So this is what it looks like with self only checked on. If I turn off, you can see that by adding that plane, it's a pretty good indication of, like, this bottom part is now much closer to this plane, so it's now being highlighted more red. Same thing with the bottom of this mushroom. So again, depending on what you're looking for, you might want to turn that on or off. In this case, honestly, it's really pretty with it on, but I'm going to turn it off for now because it's going to be a little bit easier to control. The downside of using something like ambient occlusion is if you are animating these objects, you know, when you move this close to the other one, it's going to actively change that texture, which, you know, can be problematic. Like if you move this away from the ground, the bottom texture then would change, which presumably is not what you want. If it is, it can be a really powerful tool. If it's not, it's going to be pretty annoying. So I'll turn this on for now, and we'll just sort of keep going with this. That's the ambient occlusion node. Again, you can pipe this if you want into like an AI color correct if you need to sort of further refine that. Input R, out color R, haha. Okay. So again, if you need to, you know, hue, shift, saturation, contrast. What if I do this? This is like most of procedural texturing is me just sort of going in like a maniac and just be like, what if I mess with a lot of these values? Okay, so like this is gonna give me, this is like much more concentrated red than we had previously, so like maybe if that's what we're going for, then that's great. So that's basically the ambient occlusion node. Just for grins, I want to show you guys a sort of funny thing that you can do. And this, I would like to stress again, if you know you're not adding textures to this, like if you're not going to use any kind of textures for scratches or checkers or noise or anything else, there is a really funny thing that you can do that's kind of like a hack for procedural texturing. And again, this is one of those things where, like, if you need to apply textures, for the love of goodness, don't do this. But it can be pretty powerful if you're just like setting up a quick thing. So I'm gonna make a another AI standard surface. Actually, I already have a dirt texture one. I don't need this one. Alright, so I'm gonna call this mix mushroom final. That's not a shader. Mix mix shader, and I will call my mix shader mix mushroom final. So what we're gonna do for this, I'm gonna pause this temporarily, is I would like this weird red-blue mushroom color. I'm going to grab this, and I'm just going to pipe that into shader 2. I'll grab my fill texture and put that in shader 1. I'm just going to use this as a stand-in basically for the ground. And what I want is a trippy colored mushroom and the ground to be brown. And there's no really good way to do that with procedural texturing. It's also very bad practice in this case. This is a single mesh to go in and like select the bottom faces and assign them a texture. You can fudge it with, what am I doing? You can fudge it with texturing. And basically what you want to do is apply a planar map to this, which again, for the love of goodness, don't do that if you need UVs, if you need good UVs for anything. But I'm just going to, either on the Z or the Y axis, go in and do UV, planar. Sure, X axis is fine. Great. Do that. Ooh, this one sucks to UV planar map. Give it a few seconds. It's a really dense mesh. I was 3D printing this, so I needed the dense mesh, but it's really annoying to have the dense mesh. Hey, it did a thing. Alright. So what this should do, I'm going to temporarily assign this just a new Lambert, just to show you guys what exactly I am doing here. So I'm going to put a ramp texture in the color, And you can see that by doing that, the base is shadowed black and the top is shadowed white. So if I push that a little bit, I can more or less isolate the stalk from the base. And we're just going to use this as our mix instead of using something else. You could also, if you wanted to, for some reason, go in and make the top of this green if you're just looking for a solid colored mushroom. So you can do this as many times as you need with as many nodes as you need. In this case, I don't want a green mushroom, so I'm going to kill that. I'm going to die. Okay. So yeah, so we're just going to plug this in and use this as our mix. So in this case, we have our mixed mushroom. Did I not plug anything in? Oh no, I did. Okay, cool. Wait. Okay, so this Lambert that I just made, I actually don't want to look at that, or this node from the Lambert. Alright. Thought I hooked stuff up to this. Apparently I did. So grab the out color of the mixed red blue for the mushroom, and the filled texture. I definitely hooked this up. I'm going crazy. And just grab, again, either the R, the G, or the B for this, and throw that into the mix. Other thing worth noting with the ramp texture is if you switch this to a U ramp, it is going to behave differently, and it's going to basically color, on the opposite side. So instead of going vertical, it's going to try to texture horizontally. And yes, so if I now apply the AI Mixed Mushroom Final to this, and we go ahead and render that, I've done something horribly wrong here. I have not hooked up, apparently. Wait, what? What is happening here? Okay, I think I actually might need to just refresh my render view. Sometimes it gets unhappy if you add in new shaders because it likes complaining about things. Oh. Nope, it's doing what I asked for. This is the correct node. I've just apparently set it to a U ramp and then didn't set it back off of a U ramp because I'm dumb. So switch that to a V ramp and play that again, and now we should have a brown base with a more or less trippy colored mushroom. If you wanted to apply the stalk as a different color, you could do pretty much the same thing. I would just kind of recolor the whole base and then, apply the dirt. So it doesn't really matter which order you do that in, but it's kind of fun. It's like weird, powerful kind of thing you can do. And again, if you need good UVs, like if I had to put a proper texture on this, I wouldn't want to do this. I would just make a separate map for this, like an actual file texture map, based on the UVs. But since I'm not UVing this and I'm not doing anything else to this, this is, as far as I'm concerned, a perfectly valid way to do things. Just like weird hack for my trippy mushroom. That's basically it, honestly, for the AI occlusion and all of that good stuff. I think the next video I'm probably just going to show you guys... I'll show you guys dust, and there's one other thing I want to go over before we get to dust. Procedural texturing is a lot of stuff. I'll try to make it, I don't know. It's a lot, but it's good. Procedural texturing is great.